He stood up for them, and they are standing up for him. A final salute for the captain who pleaded with Navy leadership to get his nearly 5,000 soldiers off a ship stricken with coronavirus and was later relieved of duty. The crowd chanting his name. Military leadership says he broke the chain of command. And speaking of protocol, united no more. Cities and states across the country now calling their own shots as coronavirus sweeps across America. Most states have stay-at-home restrictions, but others remain defiant. In New York City, the mayor says they'll be out of ventilators by Sunday. Similar reports across the country. One doctor warning we are playing musical chairs with life-saving equipment. But as we head into another weekend hunkered down, finding balance during a seemingly off-kilter time is key. Staying informed while also staying centered. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Another incredibly challenging week behind us, another month of uncertainty ahead. Here in New York, officials warn we are just days away from what they're calling a D-Day, when this pandemic will overwhelm hospitals. The governor is essentially threatening to seize vital medical equipment, the death toll nearly doubling in 3 days, close to 3,000 dead in New York State. Planes in hard-hit Los Angeles spelling it out in the sky: stay at home, save lives. But that's exactly what many residents in some states are not doing tonight. Their local leaders refusing to issue stay-at-home orders. Dr. Anthony Fauci says he does not understand why. Alex Perez leads us all with a look at the places in America where this pandemic may seem distant, but looms large nonetheless.
From New York,
stay home to the maximum extent possible,
to California.
We know what does work, and that's physical distancing. And we believe very strongly the stay-at-home order has helped advance our efforts in reducing the stress on the system.
And many places in between. A majority of states across the country have issued stay-at-home orders to help stop the spread of COVID-19. The measures have caused unprecedented harm to their economies, but those officials say the decision was made to protect life first. Not everyone, however, has made the same choice. Take a look. 10 states have no such order in place. In many of those states, instead, a confusing mix of county and local restrictions and closures.
We know that the best thing we can do to minimize the economic impact and the duration of that, as well as the public health throughout the state, is to put a shelter-in-place mandate in place as soon as possible, because COVID-19 doesn't respect jurisdictional boundaries. It is spreading. It will continue to spread.
Salt Lake City Mayor Erin Mendenhall issued her own stay-at-home order after Utah Governor Gary Herbert only issued a softer directive. There have been more than 1,000 confirmed cases and at least 7 deaths in Utah.
We know that when we put in place a stay-at-home mandate, that more people follow it. Businesses put in place better protections for their customers and their employees, and it slows down the spread of this virus.
In Alabama, where there are more than 1,300 confirmed cases and at least 34 deaths, Governor Kay Ivey had declined to impose a stay-at-home order, only closing non-essential businesses and schools.
But y'all, we are not Louisiana, we are not New York State, we are not California, and right now is not the time to order people to shelter in place.
Ivey, who faced an avalanche of criticism on social media, late today finally issuing a stay-at-home order. And although President Trump has been reluctant to urge the states hesitant to issue a statewide mandate, all with Republican governors, to lock down, the nation's top medical expert on the pandemic believes every state should be implementing one.
But if you look at what's going on in this country, I just don't understand why we're not doing that. We really should be.
The concern tonight is that if they don't, they may later cause damage to those residents in states that have been staying at home.
They're all slapping us in the face, and people losing jobs to a tune that we've never seen before in this country are losing them, and it's because other people aren't cooperating. Pretty soon, what you're doing, if you're not complying with these rules as a state or as an individual, is hurting all of us, and it's time for it to stop. Enough is enough, and this state-by-state thing is killing me. I mean, we're the United States of America.
And Lindsay, medical experts say there's already some proof that in states where residents are closely following those stay-at-home orders, it's working, helping to slow down the spread of the virus here in Illinois and several other states. The order has already been extended until at least April 30th. Lindsay?
Our thanks to Alex Perez. Back here in New York City, many of us received an emergency alert on our phones, a desperate plea from a city struggling to keep up with this pandemic. So ominous to hear that sound and read that message. An emergency alert asking for qualified healthcare workers to come forward to help. Our Whit Johnson is in New York City, where the mayor shared a dire message today. We are running out of time.
Tonight, outside one hospital in Brooklyn, a somber walk. A team of doctors moving a COVID victim to a mobile morgue, an increasingly familiar sight in this stricken city.
Morgue space is filling up. This grim picture outside Bellevue Hospital, about a dozen of these refrigerator trucks lined up to hold the dead.
Overnight, the death toll in New York State jumping to nearly 3,000.
Highest single increase in the number of deaths since we started.
Funeral homes overwhelmed.
60% of them in this room are COVID patients.
Pat Marmo delivering tough news to grieving families.
I would love to pick up Grandma now and have her under my roof where I could watch her, but I don't have the accommodation to get her right now.
Tonight, across America, the National Guard building field hospitals in Michigan and Connecticut, disinfecting nursing homes in Georgia. But here in New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo giving the troops different marching orders to seize ventilators from medical facilities with lower needs and redeploy them to hospitals in crisis.
I'm not going to let people die because we didn't redistribute ventilators.
The Trump administration has criticized states begging for supplies, accusing them of exaggerating the need.
The notion of the federal stockpile was it's supposed to be our stockpile. It's not supposed to be state stockpiles that they then use.
But today from the president, a pledge.
We will take every action and we'll spare no resource, financial, medical, scientific. We will not spare anything. We'll get it back into shape, the Empire State.
In New York today, staggering numbers. More than 100,000 people testing positive for coronavirus. Victoria, a school nurse, is one of them.
I am worried about me. I don't want to go out like this. I'm afraid. But I'm afraid that I'm not going to get a chance to see my family again. I'm afraid for what's going to happen to our country.
And Whit Johnson joins us now from outside that temporary hospital at the Javits Center. And Whit, tonight the president announced the new CDC recommendations on masks, and the Surgeon General acknowledges the federal guidance has been confusing to the American people.
Lindsay, initially the White House was against face coverings for the general public. Now they're recommending non-medical cloth masks as we learn more about the spread. But President Trump himself said it is voluntary and that he probably won't be wearing one. Lindsay?
Whit Johnson for us again in New York City tonight. Thanks so much, Whit. Of course, hospital bed shortages are an increasing concern across the country. Medical workers are trying to find creative ways to stretch their limited resources. States now have to compete with each other for life-saving tools like those critical ventilators. Tonight, the governor of California says his state will get what it needs, but will others? ABC's Matt Gutman reports in tonight from Sacramento.
Tonight, the virus continues to tear through the ranks of frontline workers. ICU nurse Larissa Anderson, the latest casualty, the 46-year-old mother of two. She'd been tirelessly treating COVID-19 patients in New Orleans.
They're not trying to be superheroes. They run towards, tragedy, like when everyone else runs the opposite way.
In some states, up to 1 in 5 COVID-positive patients are healthcare workers. We've been following up with Dr. Ed Latham for 2 weeks now.
We're losing staff members. Our nurses are sick.
The toll also emotional.
When I'm coming home, I can take a deep breath and I can fill my lungs, and then all I want to do is cry because I don't know what else to do with the emotion anymore.
In Detroit, doctors say they are already juggling those life-saving ventilators.
We are running out of ventilators,
and I feel like we're playing musical chairs with the ventilators we have on right now.
That as the scramble for supplies accelerates.
So what do you say to healthcare workers that are ordering trash bags? That they're not getting enough PPE?
It's unacceptable that they are, and all I can say is we hear you.
Which is why California's Governor Gavin Newsom is telling us the state is buying as much PPE as it can on the open market.
Are you finding yourself bidding against other governors in other states for PPE?
Yeah, no question. And we're bidding against the federal government. But that said, we also are one of the largest purchasers in the world. We are the 5th largest economy in the world, and as a consequence, we can outbid most.
What states like California are not doing?
Not waiting around for someone on a white horse to come save the day.
And yet every day, flickers of hope. That gauntlet of cheerleaders at Phoebe Putney Memorial in Georgia, their second patient off a ventilator.
Love to see that applause. We are joined now live by Matt Gutman. California's governor said that his state could outbid other states and even the federal government for life-saving supplies. That all sounds a bit Darwinian.
It is Darwinian. This is about the survival of the fittest, Lindsay, or in this case, the survival of the richest. California can't afford to outbid other states, even the federal government, for PPE supplies. It is also capable, and the governor is very adept at this, at tapping into his vast network of connections and very wealthy people in the state. The Zuckerbergs, Elon Musk, Richard Branson with his 747 full of protection equipment flown in from China and Hong Kong right here to California. So the governor actually admitted that this is a zero-sum game, that California gets these PPE at the expense of other states. He says he's trying to spread the wealth, but at the end of the day, he's got 40 million people to take care of here.
It's like every man for himself here. Okay, Governor Newsom sounded confident, but what is he most concerned about?
He's really concerned about the combination of both the health of the citizens and residents of the state, but also the economy. 2 million people have filed for unemployment. That is an unbelievable number. And we hear about a possible recession lasting until the end of the fourth quarter, the end of the year. He says this is going to last for many years to come, and we should all be bracing for this. It was pretty sobering to hear that from the governor of, as you just heard him say, the 5th biggest economy in the world, Lindsay.
And you've been speaking to medical professionals on the front lines for several weeks now. Many, as you know, have gotten sick. It's obvious that they are more exposed than others. But what specifically could be making them more vulnerable? Because we see them going in all suited up and then still getting the virus.
Well, there are a couple of things. Obviously, there is the frequency of exposure, right? They are in the ER or the ICU with people who are sick all the time. And just one mistake, taking off your gloves, removing your mask and touching your face, exposes you to a viral load of coronavirus and COVID-19. But it's not only that. It's the fact that the people they are right next to all the time are the sickest of the sick. And their cough is very different from our cough. The concentration of the virus in someone's cough who's in the hospital with pneumonia and deep stages of COVID-19 is full of the virus, and the chances of a tired healthcare worker catching it become exponentially higher. That's why we're seeing 1 in 5 healthcare workers, or 1 in 5 people testing positive in places like Minnesota and Ohio. Healthcare workers, 800 healthcare workers just in the state of Massachusetts alone getting sick. And this is a trend we're going to see a lot more of, Lindsay.
Really insightful and helpful information. Matt Gutman, our thanks to you. Another somber note on the job market in this country. More than 700,000 jobs were lost in March, ending the longest stretch of job creation in American history. And things are actually worse than the numbers reveal, because most of that data was collected in the first half of March before the country started fully shutting down. That makes those $1,200 checks and new small business loans that much more vital for so many Americans. ABC's Rebecca Jarvis has a closer look.
Tonight, after the worst monthly jobs report in a decade, those $1,200 checks can't come soon enough for millions of out-of-work Americans. And now, America's 30 million small business owners are scrambling to get their share of the $350 billion in paycheck protection loans backed by the government.
We went from having a thriving 40-year-old business to having it be shuttered overnight.
We need help. We need relief.
The loans, a lifeline for small companies to help keep Americans employed. As long as companies don't fire their workers, they won't have to pay back the loans. But tonight, many say they're struggling to get access to the money.
And I was immediately rejected because I don't have an existing loan with them.
Bank of America started accepting applications on its website at 8:45 this morning.
We are prioritizing. We have 1 million borrowing customers we're trying to get through the system first.
The bottom line is we can't pay our staff.
Pat Fuge owns a toy store in Green Bay, Wisconsin. He went to his local bank instead of one of the big ones.
The other national chains that we work with aren't even ready to process applications at this point.
And Rebecca Jarvis joins us now with more. Rebecca, we just heard from some of those small business owners about problems or delays in getting these loans. How is that going to be fixed?
Well, and you can imagine, Lindsay, how important that money is now. They need the money now because they're not getting paid. They're on lockdown. So the banks are working with the government, with the SBA, to, first of all, just resolve any clarifying issues around the program itself. Secondarily, the banks themselves have to put together protocols and the personnel to be responsive to this new loan program, $350 billion. I've talked to a number of banks. They tell me that their programs are that they're beefing up the staff, that they're working to have the level of personnel that is necessary to be responsive to this. But if you take just one of those banks, Bank of America, which this morning at 8:45 a.m. they started accepting applications. So far, Lindsay, they have received more than $22 billion in applications for this program. That just goes to show you the need and also the scope of how many applications are coming in the door. So it is imperative that banks figure this out and also that the SBA figures it out with them. What I will say is I've talked to a number of small businesses. The ones who have been successful are in some cases going to their community banks. They've told me they've had an easier time getting them on the phone. And that might be something, if you are a small business out there that's struggling with this, contact the local bank that you've done business with in the past. They might be able to get you answers faster.
Okay, good option there. Rebecca Jarvis, thank you so much. And as this crisis spreads and job losses mount, many Americans are losing their health insurance as well. Today, Joe Biden demanded that the administration reopen Obamacare enrollment during the outbreak, but President Trump appears to have shut the door on that move. But if you've recently lost your job and your health insurance, here's what you can do to try to get coverage. First, if you lost health insurance through your job, in many cases, you can keep your company insurance under COBRA, but you'll have to pay the full premiums, which can be expensive. And you have 60 days to enroll in Obamacare, so try and check that out ASAP. Now, if you've never had health insurance and lost your job, you might still qualify for Medicaid, so check online and see if you can still sign up for that. And if you've never had health insurance and don't qualify for Medicaid, check with your state. Many states actually run their own exchanges, and a lot of them have reopened enrollment. So please, if you've recently lost coverage, make sure to check all your options. Next, back from the brink, two patients, one 44, the other 26, both battled the virus and won. They're called outliers. They are young, healthy, no underlying conditions. But like so many who suffer the disease, they were hospitalized, cut off from everyone in their lives. Now tonight we hear from those families. Here's ABC anchor Juju Chang.
And that was the last time we saw him with the...
Daryl Ramos' young son, Taylor, is one of the outliers. Young, otherwise healthy, before COVID-19. The 26-year-old flight attendant on a ventilator for nearly 2 weeks.
One of the hardest things is when he's asking, well, if I go on the ventilator, do you know how long I'm going to be on it?
Taylor's family stayed in touch the only way they could.
Hey, Taylor, this is Dad and Mom.
Anxiously awaiting any call from the hospital.
Hello, this is Daryl.
The doctor has good news. Taylor is now breathing on his own.
Oh, that is awesome.
And then the moment they're all waiting for.
Hello, Taylor. Hey, oh, Taylor.
Can you say hi, Mom?
Awesome.
So many families across this country battling this disease together, but apart. Amanda Pomachan's husband, Titu, is now home after 3 weeks in the hospital.
What was that moment like for both of you?
It was the most joy I've ever felt.
It really was. It felt like everything was whole finally again.
It felt like busting out of jail.
Those precious video chats with his wife and his 3 little girls keeping him going. Even the doctors noticed.
But he was still on the ventilator. And that was one of the times where I called and they put the phone by his ear. And the doctor happened to be in the room. And they said, oh my gosh, look, his eyes are fluttering when I was talking to him.
Our thanks to Juju. And remember, you can catch much more on this ahead on Nightline tonight at 11:35 p.m. Eastern after your local newscast. And when we come back, the captain relieved of his duties after sounding the alarm on coronavirus, the rousing ovation he received on his way off the ship. Also, you might have binged on the Tiger King this week. Well, now it's reigniting interest in a cold case. We talk with the sheriff who's been getting a flurry of tips. And sports fans, listen up. How you can see some of the best players in the NBA back in action tonight, facing off from their couches. But first, here's a look at the top trending stories on abcnews.com.
ABC News, straightforward. Pacific on ABC.
Welcome back. We turn now to that Navy captain who was relieved of his duties after sounding the alarm about a coronavirus outbreak on his ship. Thousands are now being evacuated from the virus-stricken aircraft carrier docked in Guam. ABC's Martha Raddatz has the latest on the fallout.
If there was any doubt how the sailors of the Roosevelt felt about their captain, it is very clear tonight. One last look and a wave goodbye. Brett Crozier walked down the ramp from the carrier for the last time, relieved of duty. A mass of sailors cheering him with chants of Captain Crozier. The letter that got Crozier fired was a plea to Navy leadership to get the majority of his nearly 5,000 sailors off the ship as soon as possible, given the rapid spread of coronavirus on board. The Secretary of the Navy didn't accuse him of leaking the letter to the press, but showing poor judgment by not going through proper channels.
Relieving of him of command was in the best interest of the United States Navy and the nation in this time when the nation needs the Navy to be strong and confident in the face of adversity.
At least 137 sailors have tested positive on board, but none have been hospitalized. For Debbie Toth, whose daughter is a sailor on the Roosevelt, the captain's firing is as distressing as the virus.
I was absolutely blown away and disgusted and disheartened, and
I'm sad, quite frankly. I watched the video footage of his entire crew clapping and cheering as he was leaving the ship, and I felt the same, and I was leveled to tears. And I feel like that's the one person who has shown in the Navy that he cares what happens to my daughter and the 5,000 other sailors that are on that ship.
And Martha Raddatz joins us now. Martha, what are you hearing about how this may be impacting the morale of these sailors?
Well, I think it has tremendous impact, Lindsay, because those sailors, as you saw, are cheering him as he leaves the ship. This is like a family on an aircraft carrier. This is a floating city. They were all going through this crisis together. Brett Crozier has a really stellar career, and I think all of those sailors know it will probably come to an end. There will probably not be any promotions in his future.
And in your career covering the military, how out of the ordinary is a situation like this?
You know, the Navy is very tough. They almost have a zero tolerance policy for if any sort of officer does something they don't think is right. But in the middle of a crisis like this, in the middle of something those sailors are going through, a health crisis that the world has never seen before, and you've got a ship full of young sailors, this is a very big deal. And at the very least, it is a very bad look for the Navy at this point, Lindsay.
All right, Martha Raddatz in Washington. Thanks, Martha. Much more ahead on ABC News Prime. Just about no one is flying these days, and understandably so. How hard is the airline industry hit? We take a look by the numbers. And an update on those cruise ship passengers in limbo off the coast of Florida. But first, our post of the day, hand washing and music.
You're welcome. The coronavirus has got a go. Yes. Can you tell everybody to stay healthy?
ABC News, straightforward.
This morning, applications went live. My banker sent me the link, and it was at that link that it basically Bank of America put up a wall saying, you know what, you have to have an online ID, which we had. You have to have a checking account with us, which we had, and you also have to have a lending relationship with us, and you have to owe us money. And that's when I just felt like the rug was pulled out beneath us. We weren't the one bank we have a relationship with wasn't going to process the Payroll Protection Act to us, the small business. So basically the fact that we're a healthy, cash flow positive, no debt, no loan small business was held as a barrier to getting relief to the fact that we don't have income for 9 months.
Lots of frustration out there. Few industries have been harder hit by COVID-19 than the nation's airlines, and new data shows just how far-reaching the shutdown has been. So let's take a look by the numbers. Just over 124,000 passengers were screened by TSA agents at U.S. airports yesterday. That's a 95% drop from the 2.4 million screened on the same day last year. TSA screenings have dropped every day since March 15th, and now at their lowest number screened in more than a decade. And fewer passengers, well, that means fewer flights. American Airlines has cut domestic capacity 60 to 70% for April and up to 80% for May due to low customer demand. Delta Airlines has cut overall capacity by 70% and is parking at least half of its fleet, or more than 600 aircraft. United Airlines is cutting domestic capacity by 52%, Southwest and JetBlue by 40% in the coming months. Globally, with some 20 million scheduled seats removed by airlines last week, travel data provider OAG calculates that aviation industry is now less than half the size it was in mid-January. Much more to report out tonight on ABC News Prime. They keep us laughing in these trying times. And next, the famous comedians also using their means to try to keep small venues from going under. And the battle between 3M and the U.S. government escalating tonight. Tonight, the company pushing back on the president's order to stop sending supplies elsewhere. And with many of us under quarantine, we are forced to take our workouts inside. Here's what some studios are doing to help people isolating at home.
Tabletop position, yep. Maybe you start to pick it up. Ha, 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 ha. Power jacks one more time. Take it up. Take it up, take it up. Loosening up our shoulders. I was going to bring it down to fighter stance. Start to roll your shoulders. Any standing in the building. I'm taking them to Uppercut City. Roll your shoulders a little faster. A little faster. Go, go, go. Engage your core, tighten. Ah, come on. All right.
The death toll in New York has jumped almost to 3,000. That's more than the number of people killed in the 9/11 attacks at Ground Zero. Governor Andrew Cuomo says New York is entering a critical phase. He's pushing for more hospital space.
Javits is going to be converted to a COVID facility, 2,500 beds. So that is a very big deal. And I thank the president for doing it.
As testing increases in more states and cities, confirmed cases are being detected. In Texas, officials say Houston and Dallas have the most. Statewide, more than 5,300 have tested positive. In Southern California, for a second day in a row, Riverside County is reporting a sheriff's deputy who has died from COVID-19.
the virus is not discriminatory.
Doctors, nurses, and EMTs are also getting infected at an alarming rate. Those on the front line say a shortage of protective gear, as well as reusing that gear, is making them even more vulnerable.
What are the biggest shortages you're seeing on the day-to-day?
I think we're short gowns, obviously, the disposable isolation gowns, the N95 masks. We're using masks for 5 to 7 shifts generally.
70 cents before this started. It's now as high as $7. It can't be that we can't make these.
This leads to doctors and nurses getting uniquely high exposures if they don't have proper protective gear. This is part of the reason why otherwise healthy young doctors and nurses are getting terribly ill with coronavirus, sometimes even dying.
These supplies seized from a Brooklyn man accused by federal officials of hoarding, trying to sell them at marked up prices.
The latest figures from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows the unemployment rate rose to 4.4% in March. 701,000 U.S. jobs were lost in March. Even with the surge in unemployment, financial analysts say the real impact is likely far worse, as most of the nearly 10 million people who filed jobless claims the last 2 weeks weren't included in Friday's report. Another massive federal relief bill could be in the works. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi telling CNBC she's hoping for more bipartisan legislation on a fourth economic relief package.
I'd like to go right back and say, let's look at that bill, let's update it for with some other things that we need.
In Florida, cruise ships return to port as passengers who appear to be healthy are released. The most critical sent to the hospital, while others who show symptoms remain in isolation.
Reports today that one crew member has died on board Celebrity Infinity off the coast of Florida due to undetermined medical issues. One of more than 50 cruise ships in the Atlantic and Gulf of Mexico with crews on board that are anchored with COVID-19 concerns. Tragedy striking the Kennedy family again. A search continues for the daughter and grandson of former Maryland Lieutenant Governor Kathleen Kennedy Townsend after a canoe they were paddling in the Chesapeake Bay didn't return to shore.
As medical facilities in hard-hit areas warn that they are running low on critical supplies, one of the biggest companies that makes N95 respirator masks is pushing back against the Trump administration after the president invoked the Defense Production Act to acquire more respirators. 3M says that it has gone above and beyond to manufacture enough respirators for the U.S. market as quickly as possible. But the company also says it will not comply with a request from the administration to stop exporting respirators to Canada and Latin America, saying in a statement, quote, ceasing all export of respirators produced in the United States would likely cause other countries to retaliate and do the same, as some have already done. If that were to occur, the net number of respirators being made available to the United States would actually decrease. The president tonight saying he is not happy with the company. There was a social media post the other day that said there is coronavirus and then there is Tiger King and nothing else. Many people have been taking this time at home to binge watch the Netflix series Tiger King. The docuseries follows a society of big cat owners and conservationists. One of those people is Don Lewis, who has been missing since 1997. Lewis was married to Carol Baskin, the target of a murder-for-hire plot highlighted in the series. Since the show's premiere, the Hillsborough County, Florida Sheriff's Office has seen an influx of tips, and that sheriff joins us now. Chad Chronister, thanks so much for being here.
It's a pleasure.
Now, you said that there hasn't been any action on this case since 2011, and now you're getting about half a dozen tips per day. What did this series do to change all of that?
I think it's made the leads possible. The popularity of this series has helped generate leads, about a half a dozen a day. Now, I have to say, no viable leads. Most are people who end up watching the series and wanting to send an email or make a telephone call, and they just want to give their theory. Hey, this is how he died, and this is who did.
So any of those tips that you've gotten so far, have they actually been viable or led or credible even?
Nothing yet. We do have a detective supervisor who's combing through every single tip that comes in. Nothing viable yet, but I have to tell you, I remain optimistic. I'm sure hoping as this series continues to gain popularity, someone will feel comfortable coming forward and providing that missing piece that will help us solve this case.
What's the status of the investigation at this time?
It's a cold case. The leads have been exhausted. There's no new leads. And again, I'm hoping if you watch this series, you saw that a lot of times they all thought one was spying on one another. They were extremely competitive, eccentric, complicated, and they didn't trust anyone. So you almost had to prove your allegiance on a daily basis. So I'm hoping maybe one of those relationships have soured now, or someone again feels more comfortable now that it's being talked about and comes forward and helps us bring justice and closure for Don Lewis's family.
So you're among the millions of people who have seen the show. What did you make of it? Anything in there that you haven't checked out already?
No, and I tell you what, they have some theories that are wrong and some theories that prove suspicious. You know, some of the theories that were proved wrong was, hey, you guys need to check the septic tank. Check the septic tank. That's where he's at. The septic tank wasn't installed until years after his disappearance. Then the series leads you to believe that check the meat grinders. That, you know, you have to take a DNA swab of the meat grinders. They had been removed before his disappearance. And then some things proved suspicious. What wealthy person do you ever know, or have you ever heard about that leaves his wealth behind, has a relationship with his children, yet leaves his children behind? And then one piece that everyone continues to talk about is the will. I've talked to a lot of probate attorneys. Have you ever heard of a will that has a disappearance clause? If I ever disappear, leave my wealth to this person.
Right. When I was watching, I have to admit, I've watched, and I haven't gotten through the whole thing yet, but that was the thing that really struck me as super odd. I mean, and when you've asked that question, have they said that they've ever seen such a will that doesn't say upon my demise, but it says upon my disappearance?
Yes, and like I said, that's certainly suspicious. And you go back to, you know, she insists that, and a lot of others, hey, he left the country. Well, that's not the case that we can see. He had 2 passports, yes, 2 passports, but neither one of them was flagged that he ever left the country. No passenger manifest on a private plane or a commercial plane. So I'm going to tell you what, I truly believe that he never left the country.
What's it like to work on a case that has become a true pop culture phenomenon?
I tell you what, it's intriguing. More importantly, I hope this has spanned over the careers of a lot of sheriffs, almost 4 sheriffs. And I'm hoping that I'm the one with the hard work of these detectives, and again, with the popularity of this Netflix series, that we can solve this case once and for all.
Sheriff Chronister, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure. Stay safe, everyone.
Last week, we told you about the cash crunch facing small business owners across the country, including a comedy club in Washington, D.C. And those laid-off employees, waiters, waitresses, and bartenders are certainly feeling the pain as comedy clubs sit empty. So we wanted to tell you about an effort by a group of stand-up comedians now raising money for the wait staffs of comedy venues across the country. Here's ABC's Devin Dwyer.
D.L. Hughley, Seinfeld, everybody's been here.
Comedy clubs are launch pads for the biggest stars in stand-up.
It's depressing to see it totally empty.
But now dozens of those beloved local hangouts like DC Improv in the nation's capital have gone silent. Co-owner Allison Jaffe doing all she can to help her staff survive.
I had to lay off my whole team of 50 people, and it's awful, you know, and I love those guys and I want to help them. And, you know, we set up a staff GoFundMe page to try to raise money. We're close to $30,000 now, which is amazing.
That GoFundMe page given a surprise boost by comedian Mike Birbiglia, who got his start at DC Improv. He's put together the website tipyourwaitstaff.com to raise donations for laid-off workers at comedy clubs around the country. In exchange, Birbiglia and his friends, from Rami Youssef to Sarah Silverman to John Mulaney.
I'm going to burn through a few because... Okay, burn through a few. Okay.
Offering fans a rare inside look at how their jokes are made.
I don't think it's fair to make a baby wear a T-shirt that has like an attitude that says like born to shop or like change my diaper. Like I think that could not be their persona at all. Maybe it's their persona.
I don't know how the COVID-19 situation is going to adjust what's funny, but this joke was written pre-COVID. So I don't want any judgment from you. I don't know any black preppers. You're asking me to be prepared for when things go bad. It's bad for me now.
Birbiglia launched the effort with Comedy Central's Roy Wood Jr.
This came about because you and I were like, how do we help these clubs
because these clubs are just shut down right now. There's no revenue. What we're doing here is actually kind of not what you see as an audience member, which is like comics call each other and they go, what do you think of this premise?
His first fundraiser for the Comedy Attic in Bloomington, Indiana, where owner Jared Thompson had to cancel Birbiglia's upcoming performance and lay off staff because of the COVID-19 shutdown.
He just texted me that he had this idea called Tip Your Waitstaff, and he was going to go live on Instagram, and he told me about it, and then the next day he was like, all right, we're going live in like 30 minutes.
How much has he raised so far for your 9 staff? Do you have a sense?
Yeah, it's almost $4,000. It's so crazy. Mike is just an unbelievable person, and he's at a point in his career that he could very easily just sort of do things the way that most people do and just kind of, care about himself and his family.
For the Comedy Attic and so many other clubs, it's welcome support at a time of deep uncertainty about the future.
We're going to do everything we can to make sure that we can reopen once we get, the okay to do so. I would say that the likelihood that we can have a full packed room with a sold out show, that might be a much longer thing than just having a show where we can have 30, 40, 50 people in there. We can make that work. It's just a matter of, will we be able to book the high-level talent that we're used to booking?
For now, those big names are asking for big tips to laid-off staff while giving all of us a good laugh.
Hey, Ma, what are you doing? Put your mask on and the gloves.
For ABC News Live, I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington.
And we are joined now by a man in a profession that we certainly need right about now, veteran comedian Mike Birbiglia. He started the Tip Your Waitstaff effort. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Lindsay.
So what kind of response are you getting on helping these clubs and their employees, both from your fellow comedians and from their fans? And do you know how much you've been able to raise so far?
It's been just positive across the board. I think the clubs feel appreciated and seen. I feel like comedians, between Sarah Silverman and John Mulaney and Melissa Villaseñor are all willing to do it because we don't know what else to do right now. I feel like if you're not a medical professional, a doctor, a nurse, a delivery person, a grocery worker, you feel a little bit helpless right now.
And we've seen so many people lose their livelihoods in the past few weeks as this pandemic has taken hold. How concerned are you that some of these venues, especially some of the smaller ones, aren't going to be able to make it through?
I think most comedians are really concerned about sort of where does this land and where do we go from here, yeah, I mean, I've been going to these clubs for 20 years. I've been, the DC Improv, which was mentioned, is where I started. I was a back waiter. I worked the door there, and it's it's a great group of people who run these clubs, and I think we're going to do everything we can to help them keep going.
We heard some concern from that comedy club owner in Indiana that it may take a while for people to start going back to venues where there were once large crowds. Do you think that this is going to change the nature of stand-up at all, even if just for the short term?
I mean, honestly, I don't know. I don't know if anyone knows anything right now. And I would say that we, as comedians, in terms of like the Tip Your Waitstaff initiative, it's like we don't have any answers. We just have jokes, and that's all we can do is try to entertain right now in the midst of what feels like an insane amount of uncertainty.
You think that it's possible that the digital venues will be a good place in the future, or is that live audience component just critical to the whole experience?
I think that live performance will always exist. I think we're living in a time where we're going to have to make it to the other side of this, and I think we're going to have to become smarter as a country about science and facts and paying attention to what's happening because I think it's just a big wake-up call for the country, and I wish there was a punchline to that. There's not going to be a punchline for that for a while.
Obviously, very serious times. To your point, there's no punchline here, really. But talk about the importance of humor and laughter getting us through this.
Well, I think all of us we're inundated right now with reading and watching news and really grim statistics and people dying, and it's very, very sad. And I think comedy provides, whether it's movies or comedy specials or this kind of live stream thing that we're doing, is just it's just a taste of the absurdity that can make us just remind us of the absurdity of everything. I mean, like it really is like it's like the old cliche is like laughter is the best medicine, but that cliche came from a real place. Right. I mean, like I think there really is a degree to which it's healing and cathartic to hear someone really game out absurdity.
Well, as you just said it best, that laughter is the best medicine. And after all, it is Friday, the end of another brutal week. So if you have a good joke for us, we'd love to hear it.
Well, my whole last special, which is called The New One on Netflix, was about having a child and the first 13 months of her life. And I don't really, my new material I'm working on, I don't talk about my daughter much because she's 5. She's adorable, and there's nothing funny about being adorable, except the other day I said, Mom's going to put you to bed, and she said, she's not your mom, she's my mom. And I said, that's what my therapist keeps telling me, because all toddlers have a Boston accent. They're like, I'm tired. And Boston toddlers are like, I'm wicked tired. And that's my one joke I have about my daughter right now.
We appreciate it. And thank you so much for your time and your humor. Mike Birbiglia, we appreciate you. And again, his website is tipyourwaitstaff.com.
Thanks, Lindsay.
All right, so NBA fans craving real basketball will get to see their favorite players face off tonight, but using a controller instead of a basketball. Our partners at ESPN are hosting an NBA 2K Players Tournament starting this evening. 16 of the league's biggest stars, including top-rated Kevin Durant and Trae Young, will face off bracket style, and you'll be able to watch them play from the popular video game from the comfort of your couch. It's not the real thing, but for sports fans who are sick of watching classic games, well, it could be a decent distraction. And when we return, honoring the life of a music legend. But first, let's take a pause. While we can't travel, we can still visit virtually. Park rangers just closed down the Grand Canyon due to COVID-19. We can't wait until we have the opportunity to explore again in person. Welcome back. COVID-19 has claimed more than 6,500 lives in the United States. At ABC News, we believe those lives are worth remembering, and no one is just a statistic. Tonight, here are some of those faces. And before we go tonight, the image of the day. Stark shift here from a ghost town to a goat town, the only shopper in this small North Wales village. Mountain goats have been spotted walking around the deserted streets of the seaside town as residents stay inside. And that is our show for this hour. Stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Before we go, we want to remember three-time Grammy Award winner Bill Withers. He passed away today due to heart complications. We'll leave you tonight with people across the country at home paying tribute by singing his most famous song, Lean on Me, a message especially powerful in these trying times. Have a good weekend and stay safe.
Times in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow.
But if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow.
Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. Oh, it won't be long. I'm gonna need
somebody to lean on.
Have a problem that you'll understand. We all